Hello, everyone, and welcome. I'm excited to start our journey today with a focus on Mega Goal 1.1. This is the beginning of an engaging series on the art of advertisement and grammar. In this presentation, we'll explore key concepts that will help you improve your understanding and skills in creating effective advertisements. We'll cover important grammar tips and techniques that make advertising persuasive and impactful. So, let's get started and dive into the world of advertising and language. On this slide, the lesson objectives are outlined clearly. It is important to note that the key points will be explained thoroughly, but in a way that feels conversational and engaging. The most significant concepts will be highlighted to ensure they stand out as the most important ideas in the presentation. Additionally, connections will be made to show how these points relate to the overall theme, making the content more meaningful. As we go through, you will see that the explanations are as clear as possible, and the ideas are presented in a way that is as accessible as they are informative. By doing so, I hope the concepts will look as straightforward as possible and sound as natural as they can be, helping you understand the material better. Let's take a closer look at slide 3. First, we see the term be object form, which refers to passive sentences. In this form, the focus is on the action being done to the object. For example, this is passive sentence. Notice that we don't specify who performed the action here. So the question we ask is, do we know who did the action? If we look at the structure, it follows the pattern. Verb to be, object, and then the past participle or VPP, for instance. The room is cleaned. Here, the focus is on the room being cleaned, not who cleaned it. The form is object, verb, subject, which makes it passive. Now contrasting this with active sentences like Sarah cleans the room. In this case, the emphasis is on who is doing the action, the subject. We explicitly know who performed the action, so the question is, do we know who did the action? Understanding the difference between passive and active sentences is crucial because it helps us see where the emphasis lies, whether on the action itself or on the doer of the action. This distinction plays a key role in how we construct sentences to effectively communicate our message within our overall presentation. Today, I want to talk about how we use the passive voice to focus on what was done, rather than who did it. This is especially useful when the doer is unknown or unimportant. The structure we use is simple: object plus be plus past participle, and then by plus the subject. For example, the report was finished by the team. However, sometimes we don't even need to include the by phrase at all. We can just say, the report was finished, and the focus remains on the action and the result. This flexibility helps us emphasize the most important part of the sentence, what happened, over who performed the action. So, in the context of our overall theme, using the passive voice allows us to highlight processes and outcomes, making our communication clearer and more focused on results rather than individuals. Now let's look at how the passive voice works, starting with the basic structure. In the passive, the focus shifts from the subject performing the action to the object receiving the action. For example, in the sentence, the cake is decorated by Riyama. The cake becomes the subject, and Riyama is mentioned as the one doing the decorating. We can identify this structure with the formula: subject, VPP, be, object. The VPP stands for the verb in its past participle form, like decorated. Notice the use of be before the past participle, which is key to forming the passive. Now, contrasting this with the active voice, where the subject is the doer, we get Riyama decorates the cake. Here, Riyama is the subject, and decorates is the action verb. The general structure for the present passive tense is object plus be plus past participle. This allows us to highlight the action being done to the object, rather than who is doing it. Understanding this structure is crucial because it helps us shift emphasis depending on what we want to highlight in our sentences. Whether in formal writing or everyday communication, mastering the passive voice adds variety and clarity to our language. Let's take a closer look at the passive voice structure. In the passive, the subject of the sentence receives the action rather than doing it. For example, in the sentence, the lessons were studied by Ali. the focus is on the lessons, which are receiving the action of studying. We use the form of be plus the past participle, or PP, to form the passive. Here, were studied shows the past passive tense. Notice how the sentence is constructed. We have the subject, then the form of be, followed by the past participle of the verb. This structure emphasizes the action being done to the subject. Now compare this to the active voice. Ali studied the lessons. In the active, the subject performs the action, whereas in the passive, the focus shifts to the object receiving the action. Remember, the structure for the past passive tense is O plus B plus PP, which can be V'd or V3. This is a key point to remember when transforming active sentences into passive ones, especially in past tense contexts. Understanding this difference helps us see how the focus and emphasis in a sentence can change, which is crucial for clear and effective communication. Now let's take a closer look at the structure of the present perfect passive. First, notice the key components. We start with the subject, which in this case is the clothes. Next, we have the form of the verb to be, which is have been. Following that, we include the past participle, or PP, of the main verb, which here is washed. This structure is used when we want to emphasize the action that was done to the subject, rather than who performed the action. For example, the clothes have been washed by Rana. Now compare that to the active voice. Instead of focusing on the clothes, we focus on Rana, the doer of the action. Rana has washed the clothes. In the passive form, the sentence shifts the focus from the subject performing the action to the subject receiving the action. And importantly, the construction O plus B plus PP, that is, object plus be verb plus past participle, is a hallmark of the present perfect passive tense. This tense is especially useful when talking about actions that are completed with relevance to the present, or when the doer of the action is unknown or unimportant. So, understanding this structure helps us communicate more effectively, especially in formal contexts, or when the focus is on the action itself rather than who did it. Now let's look at the passive voice, specifically the future passive tense. In this structure, we start with the subject, which is the receiver of the action. Then we have VPP, or the verb in the past participle form, combined with be to indicate the future tense. For example, a story will be told by Grandma. This tells us that Grandma is the one doing the telling, but the focus is on the story being told, not who is telling it. Notice how the sentence shifts from being active, like Grandma will tell a story, to passive. A story will be told by Grandma. The key point here is that in the future passive, we use will be plus the past participle, which is often ed or the third form -3, to show that the action will happen in the future and that the subject is the receiver of the action. This structure is useful because it emphasizes the action or the object receiving the action, which can be important in various contexts, especially when the doer of the action isn't as important or is unknown. So, understanding this pattern helps us express future actions from a different perspective, enhancing the way we communicate about future events. Let's look at some examples of active and passive voice with simple sentences. First, consider the sentence. The cashier is paid $800 by them. Here, the focus is on the cashier receiving the payment, but the doer of the action, them, is included at the end. The second sentence is, $800 are paid to the cashier by them. Again, the emphasis is on the payment being made, and the agent, them, is mentioned after the verb. Now, both of these sentences highlight how the passive voice shifts the focus from who is doing the action to who is receiving it. This is useful when the receiver is more important than the doer, or when the doer is unknown or less relevant. On the other hand, the active version, they pay the cashier $800, puts the emphasis on the doers, the people doing the paying. Switching gears to the storytelling example. A story is told to the children by mother, and the children are told a story by mother are both passive sentences. They focus on who is being told the story, the children, and who is doing the telling, the mother. In contrast, Mother tells her children a story is active. It highlights the mother as the doer of the action. Understanding these passive and active forms helps us see how sentences can be structured to emphasize different parts of the story or information, which is especially useful in different communication contexts. This ties into our overall theme of how sentence structure affects clarity and focus in language. Let's look at some examples of active and passive voice. On this slide, we see different sentences categorized as active or passive. First, we have Salem cleans his room. This is an active sentence because Salem is doing the action directly. Next, the problem is solved. This one is passive because the focus is on the problem being solved, not who solved it. Then, my hair is often cut. Again, passive. It emphasizes the action happening to the hair, not who is doing the cutting. Finally, Ali studies his lesson, which is active because Ali is performing the action himself. Now the key question is, active or passive, or sometimes which one is more appropriate? Remember, active voice makes sentences clearer and more direct, while passive voice can be useful when the doer is unknown or unimportant. So, when you're constructing sentences, think about whether you want to highlight the subject performing the action or the action itself. This understanding helps you communicate more effectively and choose the right voice for your message. Winter is colder than autumn. When we compare these two seasons, the key difference that stands out is temperature. Winter brings significantly colder weather, which is why it's often associated with snow and freezing temperatures. Autumn, on the other hand, starts to get cooler but isn't as cold as winter. This difference in temperature is one of the main reasons we experience different activities and clothing styles in these seasons. Understanding these temperature differences helps us better appreciate how the climate influences our daily lives and the environment around us. Now let's look at this comparison. A car is a bike. The word we're focusing on here is faster than. This phrase helps us understand the relationship between the two vehicles in terms of speed. Generally, a car is faster than a bike, meaning it can cover distances more quickly. Highlighting this point is important because it emphasizes how different modes of transportation vary in performance and efficiency. In the context of our overall theme, understanding speed differences helps us appreciate the advantages and limitations of each option. So, when we say a car is faster than a bike, we're illustrating a key concept about performance that influences transportation choices. A snake is more dangerous than an earthworm. Now, this might sound surprising at first, because earthworms are so harmless and even beneficial to the soil. But when we talk about danger, we're referring to the potential harm a creature can cause. Snakes, especially venomous ones, can pose serious risks to humans and animals. Earthworms, on the other hand, are completely harmless and play a vital role in maintaining healthy soil. So, understanding these differences helps us appreciate the variety of creatures and their impacts, which is a key part of our overall exploration of wildlife and safety. Ostriches are the biggest birds in the world. When we think of bird size, most of us picture smaller species, but ostriches truly stand out. They can grow quite tall, reaching up to about 9 feet in height, which is impressive for a bird. Their size isn't just about height, they also weigh as much as 320 pounds. This enormous size helps them survive in their natural habitat by making them less vulnerable to predators. It also plays a role in their speed and agility, which we'll talk more about later. So, when we consider the overall theme of adaptation and survival, ostriches exemplify how size can be a key advantage in the animal kingdom. Bungee jumping is truly one of the most exciting adventures you can undertake. It's a thrill that combines adrenaline, courage, and a sense of achievement all at once. When we talk about exciting activities, bungee jumping stands out because it pushes you out of your comfort zone and gives you an incredible rush. It's not just about the jump itself, but about facing your fears and feeling alive in that moment. Throughout this presentation, we've explored different types of adventures, and bungee jumping really exemplifies the essence of pure excitement. It's a perfect example of how adventure can elevate our experiences and bring a new perspective on our limits. So in this slide, we're exploring comparisons using the phrase, as tall as. Here, we see that Dan is as tall as Sam. This means that Dan and Sam have the same height. It's a simple way to compare two people or objects to show equality in some quality, like height in this case. The key point here is understanding the structure. X as adjective as Y, we can change the adjective depending on what we're comparing. For example, if we wanted to compare something else, like weight or speed, we could use the same pattern. This slide emphasizes that the phrase as is a useful tool in English for making direct comparisons, and it helps us connect ideas clearly and effectively. Remember, using as makes your comparisons precise and easy to understand, which is essential when communicating differences or similarities in your ideas. All right, let's look at this slide. Here we see the structure, not as tall as, and this is a common way to make comparisons in English. For example, when I say Sam is not as tall as Tom, it means Tom is taller than Sam. The key point here is the comparison of two people or things, highlighting that one does not reach the height of the other. Notice how we use not as plus the adjective, which in this case is tall, and then as again to complete the comparison. It's a useful pattern to express when something is less than something else. On this slide, you see the example, Sam is not as tall as Tom. This helps us understand the structure clearly. We can also flip it around and say, Tom is taller than Sam. But the not as structure is very common in everyday speech and writing. Overall, understanding this comparison form is important because it allows us to describe differences between people or objects more precisely. It's a fundamental part of expressing comparisons, which is a key theme in mastering English descriptions. In descriptions, we often use sense verbs like see, hear, smell, taste, or feel to make our language more vivid and engaging. These sense verbs are usually paired with the word like, which helps us introduce a comparison or example. And then, we follow that with a noun to specify what exactly we're describing. For example, you might say, I see like a sunset, or it feels like velvet. Using this structure makes your descriptions more expressive and relatable, helping your audience visualize or experience what you're talking about. This approach ties into our overall theme of making language more dynamic and memorable, especially when we're trying to convey sensory experiences. So remember, when you're describing something, think about how you can combine sense verbs with like and a noun to create more vivid imagery. Let's look at some interesting points about transportation and luxury goods throughout history. The first car was created by Carl Benz in 1886, which really marked the beginning of modern automobiles. Today, cars are produced by companies all over the world, showing how the industry has become truly global. Looking ahead, we can expect smaller cars to become more popular, especially as people look for more efficient and eco-friendly options. Switching gears a bit, when we talk about luxury and craftsmanship, Cartier is well known for making beautiful perfume, watches, and jewelry. The perfume industry itself has a fascinating history, starting with François Coty in the late 1800s. For many years, French perfumers have been renowned for their high-quality fragrances. In terms of future trends, more hybrid cars are expected to be purchased by consumers, reflecting a shift towards greener technology. And if we think about the past, many people used bikes to get to work, which shows how transportation methods have evolved over time. Altogether, these points highlight how transportation and luxury industries continue to develop, shaping the way we live and move around. On this slide, we're looking at different ways to describe actions related to products and processes. For example, has been enjoyed shows how something can be appreciated by people, like a meal or a product. Was lunched refers to the act of providing a meal, usually in a restaurant setting. Then, was packaged highlights how products are prepared for sale, emphasizing the importance of packaging in marketing and distribution. Moving on, was named indicates how products or brands get their names, which is key for recognition. Was worn relates to clothing or accessories that are used by people. Were sprayed could refer to products like perfumes or cleaning agents that are applied by spraying. Was opened shows the initial access to a product or item. Was used emphasizes the application or utilization of a product. Were considered points to the decision-making process, such as evaluating options before choosing a product. And finally, are made indicates the manufacturing process, which is fundamental to understanding how products come into existence. Overall, these phrases help us describe various stages and aspects of products, from creation to consumption, which ties into our broader discussion on product development and marketing. When we look at these key qualities, most reliable, brighter, cleaner, healthier, and most refreshing, each one plays a crucial role in what we're offering. Being the most reliable means you can trust that our product consistently delivers quality every time. The brighter aspect highlights how it enhances your experience, making things more vibrant and appealing. When we say cleaner, it emphasizes the importance of purity and freshness, which ties directly into health. A healthier choice isn't just better for you, but also better for the environment. And finally, being the most refreshing captures that feeling of renewal and revitalization you get from using our product. All these points come together to reinforce our overall theme, providing a solution that's not only dependable, but also elevates your daily experience in a meaningful way. It's about creating something that's truly better in every sense, more reliable, more vibrant, cleaner, healthier, and ultimately more refreshing. So when we talk about sensory perception, it all begins with what we see, look. Our eyes provide us with crucial information about our environment. Then there's sound. Listening helps us understand what's happening around us. Next, taste. This is a direct connection to our food and drinks, giving us immediate feedback on flavor. Smells are also incredibly powerful, often triggering memories or emotions before we even consciously realize it. And of course, we have the sense of smell, sometimes overlooked, but essential in forming our overall perception. Looking again at these senses, especially sound, highlights how each one contributes uniquely to our understanding of the world. Together, they create a rich, multi-layered experience that shapes how we interpret everything around us. This interconnectedness is at the core of how we perceive and interact with our environment, which ties back to our overall theme of sensory integration and awareness. Now, for this final slide, let's look at the workbook on page 258, which provides some useful exercises labeled E and F. These exercises are designed to reinforce what we've discussed today and help you apply these concepts practically. As you work through them, focus on understanding the key points we've covered. Think about how they connect to the bigger picture of your learning journey. And don't forget, completing these exercises as homework will really solidify your grasp of the material. Remember, the goal isn't just to finish them, but to truly understand how these ideas work together in real-world scenarios. So, take your time, engage with the questions thoughtfully, and you'll be well on your way to mastering this content.